YouTube, what's going on? Welcome to the Off the Schneid 2020 NFL Preview Series, where I'll be going over all 32 NFL teams, breaking down their rosters, their schedule, giving you a record prediction, as well as helping out with some betting tips. If this is your first time at the channel, do me a massive favor, hit that like and subscribe button, turn on notifications, and check the description for links to social media for Off the Schneid. Follow us on there as well. I want to give a massive shout out to OurLads Scouting Services and OurLads.com for helping me to make these videos. I'm on their website almost daily, and if you're a serious football fan, guys, you need to have this website bookmarked, favorited, whatever it is. Helps me at draft time, fantasy football purposes, when creating bet slips, as well as DFS lineups. It's your one-stop shop for NFL scouting services. There's a link in the description for OurLads.com as well as the social media. Do me a favor again, hit that like and subscribe button. But enough of that. Let's get to your favorite NFL football preview. All right, today we're taking a look at the Atlanta Falcons. We will start, as always, at the quarterback position. We got Matthew Ice Ryan, aka Matty Ice. Interesting little stat. He set a career record for rush yards last year. Interesting little stat. Looking to make a run at the Hall of Fame, obviously. He's a former MVP. One of those guys that's kind of in the middle. He has that MVP, which is huge. If he could get a Super Bowl win, he's 100% in the Hall of Fame. I personally think that he probably will get in by the time we get there and by the time we get to his eligibility. I think he probably will have the stats. Plus the MVP really helps. So I think he probably will get in by the end of the day. I would put him in there ahead of guys like Phillip Rivers for sure. Either way, he's kind of had a tendency of inconsistency, which is much the Atlanta Falcons, a little bit inconsistent. So if we go back to his 2012 season, 32 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Very good season, 4,700 passing yards. And then the next season, drops down to 26 and 17. Not a huge drop off, but then he bumps it back up, 28 and 14, down to 21 and 16. So there's kind of been a good, great, above average type of thing. 1 year, drop off the next, above average, drop off, that kind of thing. That's kind of happened since 2012. And if we're following that narrative, last year was a bit of a drop off season for Matty Ice. 26 touchdowns, 14 picks, 4,400 yards, and he missed one game, which was only the second time in his career he's missed 3 games total in his entire career. So very, very durable plays. He always plays. So again, if we're sticking to that narrative, a stat line to kind of pencil in, I'm not really the type of guy to pencil in stats. I really don't like to do that. But if you were going to for Matty Ice, you could say that he's going to be pushing that 5,000 pass yard mark, 30 plus touchdowns, and, around 10 interceptions, something like that, is where he should kind of bounce back to, if that's the narrative that we're following. Which, when there's a body of work like this, it's kind of hard to ignore. It's similar to the NFC East, the division winner. There hasn't been a division winner back to back since 2003, 2004. So it's kind of, when there's that size of a body of work, it's hard to ignore it completely. But that's kind of their quarterback position. They do have Danny Etling, Kurt Benkert, and then Matthew Schaub, who's still there, who played the one game last year. I don't personally, for me, I was really hoping that Jake Fromm would have went to Atlanta. I think that would have been the absolute perfect landing spot for him. He's a Georgia guy. He could sit on the bench for probably like 3 years at least, maybe even 4. Sit on the bench, learn behind Matty Ice, get better, and then could be the heir apparent to Matt Ryan, or he moves on somewhere else and you can trade him for a 3rd round, 2nd round pick, something like that in the future. Obviously they didn't really have the draft capital to do that. I wouldn't have minded if they traded back into, say, the 5th round or 4th round or something like that to grab Jake Fromm. But with what they had a very good draft, and I actually think that I might have been harsh on them. I gave them a B. I maybe should have bumped that up because I think they filled a lot of holes, and I think they did a great job in the draft. My one thing was that they didn't get a backup quarterback, and for me, Matt Schaub's not the guy. Not that they necessarily will need one, but I just like to kind of shore up those things, especially when you can get a guy like Jake Fromm, who's a local guy, probably grew up a Falcons fan, all that kind of thing. You can get him that late in the draft. and he's a trustworthy backup. But either way, Matty Ice is one of the better quarterbacks, top 10 guy for me in the league. Running back, they obviously went out and signed Todd Gurley, cut ties with Devontae Freeman, which was, in my opinion, a good decision and a good move. And I think Todd Gurley can do everything that Devontae Freeman did, but better, is my opinion on him. And he's still only 25 years old. People don't really know that or seem to forget. I don't know. But people are saying that he's got, 40-year-old knees and all this kind of stuff. But he had the stats last year. He had 12 rushing touchdowns. I think almost 900 yards, something like that. Catches passes out of the backfield. I think he's going to flourish in this offense. And I think that's a kind of a match made in heaven. That's a perfect fit. Behind that, it's kind of makes me a little nervous. Brian Hill's not it. Quandre Olson's not it. Ito Smith, I do like Ito Smith. He obviously had some injury issues last year, but we'll see. Either way, behind Todd Gurley, and that's a little nerve-wracking behind Todd Gurley, who has had injury trouble. I don't personally believe that he's got 40-year-old knees. I don't believe that. And I'm going to be looking to target Todd Gurley in fantasy because I think you can get him cheap. But behind him it's pretty light. I'll say that. Hayden Hurst comes in to replace Austin Hooper. I think that's a great pickup. He's kind of perfect for this offense, in my opinion. I think he could fit very, very well. The only issue I have with Hayden Hurst, and it's fairly small, is he did have some injuries and he didn't get the ball a lot. He didn't get targeted a lot in that offense in Baltimore. But I mean, the measurables are there. Everything is there for him to flourish in this offense. There's no reason why you couldn't, pull it back a little bit from Austin Hooper's stats. Obviously, he had a great year, but so 787 with 6 touchdowns for Austin Hooper. I think that it's very reasonable to pencil in 500 plus yards for Hayden Hurst and probably like 4 touchdowns. And that's being pretty conservative in my opinion. I really like the potential for Hayden Hurst in this offense. Wide receivers, Julio Jones is going to be probably a first ballot Hall of Famer, I would imagine. I don't know how he doesn't. First ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest wide receivers to play by the end of it. And right now, he's still a top 3 wide receiver, in my opinion. Can't say enough about Julio Jones. The dude's a freak, dude's a beast. I love me some Julio. Calvin Ridley, he's getting hyped up to absurd levels, in my opinion. This offseason, he's basically been a carbon copy of himself for his first 2 seasons. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with his numbers and who he's been, but I do think that he needs to take that step. There's no more Mohamed Sanu. I do like Russell Gage in the slot. But beyond that, I mean, Russell Gage in the slot, yes. Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, absolutely. But behind that, there is literally nothing. Laquan Treadwell has been pretty much a bust from his first round pick, or first round draft position, I should say. And then beyond that, there's really nothing. They don't even have Hardy there anymore. It's pretty light. I mean, you should be fine. Those guys, as long as everybody stays healthy, which, should be fine, then they'll be okay. But if there's an injury at the wide receiver position, they're going to be in a tough spot. And that's kind of the narrative up and down this roster, is there's not a ton of depth. There's really not. So if one guy gets hurt at running back, quarterback, wide receiver, there's positions on the defense on defense that if they get injuries, they're gonna have a tough time replacing those guys. On the offensive line, Jake Matthews, James Carpenter, Alex Mack, and then their 2 first-round picks from last year, Caleb McCary, Chris Lindstrom. I do really like the Matt Hennessy pickup. I think that he potentially could slide into this offensive line this year, especially if you need him to. I think he can, and I think he'll be the future at center for this team. So and here's going to be my overall narrative for the Atlanta Falcons. I really like the direction that they're moving. I like a lot of their draft picks and a lot of the guys that they've picked up, and I like the direction that they're going in. But for me, they're not quite there yet, and that's what we'll get to when we do the prediction for the record and everything like that. I want to touch quickly on their coaching staff. I am a huge fan of Dan Quinn. I really like him. Dirk Cotter is very good, and I think Raheem Morris is former head coach, and I think he's I think he's fine. He's definitely fine. They put him on the offensive side of the ball last year, which is not crazy. A lot of times they'll do that defensive backs coach, wide receiver coach. It's similar. You know, you have similar traits. You look for similar things. But he obviously flourishes a lot more on the defensive side of the ball. And Dan Quinn will no longer be wearing both hats as far as head coach and defensive coordinator. So that I think will help this team. And it seemed to at the end of last season. So I think that's a really smart move. If you look at Dirk Hatter's kind of coaching stats, he's been in the top 10 5 of the last 6 years as far as total offense, but he's only been in the top 10 for rushing yards once. So he clearly likes to run and gun, throw the ball. That is Dirk Hatter. That's what he's done. And as far as Dan Quinn, his defenses have been an extremely far cry from when his Seattle days. So, and that's not necessarily all Dan Quinn's fault. I just want to kind of point that out. Again, that's not necessarily his fault. He hasn't had the talent, for sure, hasn't had the talent that Seattle had. And maybe he kind of felt like he had to do a lot of it on his own while wearing the head coaching hat. I don't know, but we'll see. And again, I like some of the pieces that they put in place. So let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Actually, let's finish up on the offensive line. They very much have to be better than last year, which in my opinion might be tough. They allowed 50 sacks. You can't allow Matty Ice, who's 35 years old, not extremely old, but he's not a spring chicken either. You can't allow him to take that much damage. 50 sacks is too many. They were in the bottom, I think they were bottom five, I should say, in sacks allowed last season, which is not a place that you want to be. They did, however, which is interesting. This is an interesting stat considering they had little to no run game. They led the league in first downs. That's a big stat for me. I think that says a lot to where they could be or kind of should be and maybe should have been last year with a better run game. Because, yeah, they can move the ball. And no one's going to deny that. No one's going to dispute that. The Atlanta Falcons, they can get their offense. They can move the ball. But they gotta do a better job of protecting Matty Ice. You have to do a better job. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball now. So Dan Quinn's a former defensive line guy, which they've had their ups and downs. I'll say that. I think Adrian Claiborne leaving is actually a positive. I really do. And it's weird. It's in a weird spot. They three of their top 5 sack getters last season are off this team. However, they went out and grabbed Dante Fowler, who I think is a huge addition, an upgrade for sure over Vic Beasley, and drafted Marlon Davidson, who's I think it starts right away. So if I'm looking at this depth chart here, and I'm looking at the defensive line, I am moving Marlon Davidson for Tyler Davison. I'm starting him. I do start Alan Bailey. And then I move Charles Harris to kind of rotate with Dante Fowler and Tack McKinley. And then Olakun starts at linebacker for me with Deion Jones, and Deion Buchanan and Michael Walker back those two up. That's kind of how I have this defense set up. That's how I would start it. That's how I would trot out my defense every week. And I think that would Grady Jarrett, for me, Grady Jarrett's a top 3 interior rusher in this league. I think he's fantastic with a little bit of help, a little more help. Tack McKinley, I honestly thought he was going to be a 10 sack guy every year coming out of college. I thought he was going to be very, very, very good, very productive. He's been good, but he just hasn't gotten those numbers yet. And this is a year that I think I've been saying this for probably 3 years, but this is a year that I think he could take that step. With Dante Fowler, Grady Jarrett, and Tack McKinley, I think that's very dangerous. And then Charles Harris can rotate in as well. Marlon Davidson, I think that this is probably the best opportunity, in my opinion, that Tack McKinley has had in this defense to be that kind of pass rusher guy that he was drafted to be. So I like what they've done on the defensive line. And I think that they can definitely build off of this and make some moves. Again, I like the direction that they're moving, even on defense here, and their defense is pretty subpar. As far as getting at the quarterback, they were in the bottom 2. They had 28 sacks last year, which is not good. You got to get after the quarterback, especially when teams are getting after yours as much as they are. And then they allowed 28 passing touchdowns. That's a few too many as well if you want to be a playoff team. Deion Jones, one of the better kind of pass coverage type of linebackers in the league. I really, really like Deion Jones. And then I do like Olakun and Buchanan, like I said, and the Michael Walker draft pick was fantastic as well. So up front, I really like the direction that they're going for sure. This kind of looks like it kind of looks like the makings of like a Tampa 2 type of defense. I'm not sure what kind of formations they'll really run week to week, but to me, it has the makeup of looking like trying to be a Tampa 2 type of defense. Their back end just isn't good enough for that yet. AJ Terrell, I thought was a fantastic draft pick, made a ton of sense. And then Isaiah Oliver, I think will be better this year. Kendra Sheffield, Jordan Miller, Ray Wilson, all these guys will be better this year. And then AJ Terrell helping out as well. So like I said, the direction they're going is the right direction, I think. I really do, even though they lost some big guys. Let's take a look at who they've kind of lost. They lost Devondre Campbell, but I think the Olakun being there makes up for that. And I don't really, I mean, it's not great. It's not a good person to lose off your defense, but I think they can make up for it. Adrian Claiborne, I actually think that that's a plus with him leaving. I don't think he really wanted to be there. I just really, really don't think he wanted to be there anymore. Same with Desmond Trufant. I'm not so sure he wanted to be there anymore. Vic Beasley, he had that one huge season and he's still very, very good, and that's a big loss, but they bring in Dante Fowler. That's okay. Again, Adrian Claiborne, they can replace him probably with Davidson, if you ask me, or Charles Harris. Jack Crawford, I'm not too worried about losing him. So even though they lost some pieces, I think that it's almost like addition through subtraction. And like, I know that doesn't make sense a lot of times, but I think that I honestly think that they got better. It might sound crazy, but I actually think that they might have gotten better, and my record prediction will show that. So I do think that they are going in the right direction. I like a lot of I like their draft for sure. I like the direction they're going, and we'll just get to the record prediction now. But I can't say it enough. I really like the direction that they're moving, but they do have a bit of a window with Matty Ice and Julio Jones. So let's move to the record prediction and schedule for 2020. All right, there you see the record prediction. We got the low, high, my. The Falcons are just very, very inconsistent, streaky, whatever adjective you want to use. That's kind of what they've been for the past few seasons with a lot of the same players. So it's hard to project. That's why there's a pretty large variance there in my, maybe not. It's maybe not crazy, but 9-7 is what I'm predicting they go, which is an improvement off last season and should put them to at least be in contention for that 6th or 7th wildcard spot at the very least. And to be honest, I think that they probably do get in. I might be higher on I think I am higher on the Falcons than I am than the Bucks. I think I have their records pretty close, but I think I'm pretty even. They play the NFC North and AFC West, but they kind of get the shaft when with their extra 2 games playing the Seahawks and the Cowboys. Those are tough games, even at home against the Seahawks to open the season, and then on the road against the Cowboys in game 2. That's interesting. But they kind of get the shaft as far as that's concerned. Within this division, it's them and the Saints. The Saints play the Niners and the Eagles. So those are two tough games for both those teams. So we'll start it off, or we'll look at the odds. 8-1 on your money to win the division. It's not a terrible bet, to be honest with you, at all. But personally, I do like the Saints, and that's probably who I will be betting on. But it's not a crazy, terrible bet to go 8-1 on your money for the Atlanta Falcons, especially obviously if you're a Falcons fan. And again, like I said, I might like them more than the Bucks. just because there's more consistency with the roster with the Falcons, and considering what's going on in the world right now, that can play a decently sized factor as far as projecting and making predictions. But that's what I'm going, 9-7. Let's get to the schedule. First game of the year, they're at home against the Seahawks. That's a tough game. And if I'm being honest, I think the Seahawks get that win. If this were later in the season, I would probably like the Falcons. But to open the year, and I think they're going to be better through the air, the Seahawks, better than they were, and they were fantastic. Russell Wilson's one of the best quarterbacks, top 2, in my opinion, in the league as a quarterback in the NFL. So I think that there's a decent possibility they start 0-2. Then they go to Dallas, and I think the Cowboys, again, are going to be able to run and gun on this defense. I don't think the secondary is going to be able to keep up with the Cowboys, at least for sure not in the early part of the season. They might get better late in the season, which is when they play Tampa Bay and the Chiefs, which is good, and the Saints, which is good because I think they're going to need some time with these young corners to get there. And I think that'll benefit them for sure. So I think they probably take a loss in their first 2 games. Then they go back home and play the Chicago Bears, and that's a game that you kind of have to win. And I think that they would definitely be able to get that win at home. If it were in Chicago, maybe a different story, but I like the Falcons to get that win at home. On the road against Green Bay, tough game, and it's a winnable game at this point. It's early October. It's not crazy cold in Green Bay yet. So, which would concern me, Atlanta being a dome team, that would concern me a little bit. If this were in, December, November, January, something like that, I would definitely think that would be a huge advantage for the Packers. I don't see it being a huge advantage, but I do think the Packers get that win. At home against Carolina, I do not see them losing to the Carolina Panthers. I really don't. Even in Carolina, I think they get that win. On the road against Minnesota, similar teams. Very similar teams with weak secondaries, in my opinion. Both teams have weak secondaries. Again, they're just young. I shouldn't say weak. Maybe weak is the wrong word to use, but they're very young and inexperienced. And then I like the Falcons offense much more than the Vikings offense. So I think that they go into Minnesota to get that win. I really do. I think the Vikings fall off a little bit this year. At home against Detroit, I think they get that win. So this is a good stretch right here. Carolina, Minnesota, Detroit, Carolina, again, that's a good stretch to go 4-0. It's not, you wouldn't call it a quarter of the season, but it's 4 games, so you can kind of go there, right? It's, if you're looking at the first quarter of the season, actually it is, sorry. If you're looking at the first quarter of the season, they go 1-3, you're not feeling so great, but then they go on this nice stretch of going 4-0. And then they're right back in there, 5-3, looking good. At home against Denver, that's a super tough game. I really like the Denver Broncos. I really do. I really, really do. But it is in Atlanta. That's a close game. I'm not going to say who wins or who loses. That's gonna decide where they fall in this kind of low, high, my. But that's a big game, big pivotal game right before their bye. Week 10 bye week, I think is a great spot to have your bye week. I think they will be thinking playoffs for sure. Might allow their secondary and their defense to regroup and kind of have a few things figured out, get some more practice time in, that kind of a thing. I think that's a great spot to have their bye week. And then they go on this kind of, I don't want to call it like killer's row, but this is a tough stretch after their bye. So that's another reason why it's a great spot to have that bye there. At New Orleans, they play New Orleans tough and well, even in New Orleans, at home, wherever it is. These two teams, this is probably the biggest rivalry for the Falcons, I believe. I'm not a Falcons fan. I do like the Saints. I'll say I'm not a Falcons fan, but I know that this is a big rivalry game. I know that it is. So I'm picking them to split with New Orleans, whether they both win on the road, both win at home. I don't know what it is, and same with the Bucs. And call it easy. It's a bit of a cop out, sure, but that's what I'm picking. I'm picking them to split with both those teams, and we'll just call it home and home. At home, we'll go against Vegas. I like the Falcons to probably get that win against inexperienced young secondaries. But I trust Matty Ice over Derek Carr or Mariota. I don't care who the starter is there. I trust Matty Ice more than either of those quarterbacks. I just really hope for their sake that Todd Gurley is healthy all season and still playing well at a high level. And I honestly think that he probably will. So then New Orleans get that win. They go on the road against LA. I think that they beat the Chargers. I don't think the Chargers are a very good team this year, and I mean that's a good spot for them to play Atlanta because Herbert will be starting by that point for sure, and he'll have some starts under his belt by then. But that's a tough game, even at home. You know, LA fans aren't crazy, especially for the Chargers. So I think that's a good opportunity to get a road win. At home against Tampa, I think they get that win. And then on the road against Kansas City and Tampa Bay, they probably, in my opinion, they lose both those games, especially this Kansas City. I think that they definitely lose to Kansas City. I think they can run and gun all over this defense. If you're calling me crazy, then I got nothing for you. But yeah, there you go. So you can kind of see where I'm at. I think that they have to win that 4-game stretch right there. They have to get those wins. I really do. They have to do well early in the season with this kind of killer's row. Vegas is a better team than people are giving them credit for sure, especially on defense. And then like the Chargers are the only team where you absolutely have to win that game is against the Chargers. Even against the Raiders, you kind of absolutely have to win that game, to be honest with you, when you're looking at this schedule that they got at the end of their season. So there you go. Let me know what you think in the comments about the Atlanta Falcons. But there's your breakdown for 2020 for the Dirty Birds.